Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unit 18. If you're new or if you return, you're very welcome. My name is Mary Coakley, and I look after this space for Trinity, which is really about reaching out into the community, getting to know our neighbours, sharing information and people. And we're very lucky to have such a good range of expertise and willing speakers, people who can come along and give great talks. Do get in touch if you feel like you have good ideas for other speakers in Trinity, or you want to hear about a particular topic, or just generally feedback on what you thought. Feel free to let us know. As you know, we're videoing the event, and any you missed, they'll be on the Trinity College YouTube site. Questions at the end. We need this mic because it just helps with the picking up the questions for the video. Thank you again to Professor Lorraine Leeson. As you know, some of you who were here before know Lorraine is a professor in Deaf Studies at the Centre for Deaf Studies and now Associate Vice Provost for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion. So she's a very busy lady and I really appreciate your time. Thank you. The person instrumental in all of this, who brings a lot of people together and is a great community activist, Betty Ash. So certainly big shout out and thank you, and yes, thank you, Betty.
Thank you, Mary, and thanks everyone for coming along this evening. I'm delighted to be here. I do a lot of outreach talks to school students, so it's a different audience for me, different again from first-year engineers. So I'm delighted to be here and talk a little bit about artificial intelligence and what I specifically do in the world of speech technology. So you'll see a lot of branding on my slides. I work in Trinity College, obviously, but my research centre, ADAPT, have a program, an outreach program for transition year students called AI in My Life. And some of the material I'm borrowing from that, but it was developed by the ADAPT Research Centre and their various partners all listed there. To get students a little bit more informed about AI and how it's affecting their lives and, really what it is, because there's a lot of hype around it. So if any of you know any kids at that sort of age or you're involved in schools, there is a program. ADAPT is very happy to send people out to schools to do the talks. I've done them myself. It's great fun. So if you know anybody who might be interested, there's a website there, or I can share again. So, I'm an engineer, and I think a lot of the time when people think of what does an engineer do, they picture them wearing a hard hat, designing bridges, keeping airplanes up in the air, controversially suggesting we put wind farms out in the Irish Sea, but I work on quite different things. So there's a whole branch of engineering called signal processing. What's a signal? Well, if you've ever phoned your friend not knowing where they were and it turns out they're in Japan, right? So your voice goes through your phone, magically makes its way over to Japan, and then they speak back to you, and it's seamless. So that's all signal processing. That anything that has information in it, and we want to send it down a wire or send it through the air, there's engineers behind that. And we don't get a lot of credit for it, because if we do a good job, you don't notice it, okay? So signals can be things like video or text or, stock prices from the markets encoded. But the signal I deal with is speech, okay? And the other thing that engineers like to do is we like to physically understand the thing we're working with, okay? So if I was working in aeronautical engineering, I'd have to understand things like Newton's laws and fluid mechanics and gravity, how to keep airplanes up in the sky. But for me, I need to understand where human speech comes from and how we use it in our everyday interactions. So that comes back to a spot of anatomy and physiology. So if you're lucky enough to speak without any form of impediment, and you've been doing it since you were a child, you don't really think about where speech comes from. But, we take a breath in and we blow it out. We use our diaphragm, we use our whole breathing apparatus. And then depending on what we do with it, like any musical instrument, we can create constrictions, we can change the shape of it, we can use our lip, mouth, teeth to change the sound that comes out. Just like, for example, if you're playing a clarinet, you would use your fingers to change the shape of that instrument. So engineers do all sorts of fancy modeling of that whole system as if it was a musical instrument or a tube. But one of the vital things to know is, if ever you make a vowel sound like A, E, I, O, and if you put your hand on your neck, you'll feel your vocal cords vibrating. And those pictures on the right are different positions. So if I was to cut my head off and look in from the top, this is what I would see. So I would see my vocal cords moving. So they open and shut and let the air come through. And anytime as an engineer you see vibration, you're very interested in that, because vibration means sound. So any sound that you hear is just air vibrating, tiny, tiny little molecules vibrating and moving along. They reach your ear and they set off similar vibrations in your eardrum that you can perceive as sound, or you perceive as speech if it's very special kind of sound. So that vibration to me as an engineer means frequency, okay? And we're always very interested in the frequency content of speech. So what do I mean by that? I always find it's easier to think of a musical note because it's a bit more tangible for people. So if my audio is working, this is a middle C on a piano. Okay. So if you play a piano, you might notice that you might recognize that sound. So that's from, if you've ever looked inside a piano, you'll see, you press the key, the hammer action, we get vibrations there, and it produces this lovely rich sound. But as an engineer, I wonder, well, how much frequency is in that and how is it changing over time? And I make a picture of it. So I look at time from left to right, and I look at frequency, or how fast is this vibrating? And if this is when I hit middle C, okay? So I hit middle C here, and first of all, everything's dark there, I don't hear anything, but then the bright colors there represent energy, okay? So there's some energy in this signal, and most of the energy is at a very specific frequency, which turns out to be 262 hertz, which is related to the time between those shaking molecules. We'll not worry too much about that. But if you think back at my vocal cords vibrating, we can actually think of speech being similar enough to music in the sense that it is just another mixture of frequencies or a mixture of notes. It might not sound quite as pleasant, but that's why humans can sing as well, because we can actually use our vocal apparatus to do that. So if I do a similar time frequency of speech, okay, it looks like this, which is a bit more complex than the middle C on the piano, but I see some characteristics. So where I see these stripes again, they are sounds like E, oo, ah, a, where there's vibrations. So if you're very experienced, you can actually look at one of these pictures and figure out what was said. Okay? So, they used to have rather nerdy competitions where they'd put something up every Friday and, the first person who got it right would win the glory and honor of being the best at reading these. Now, I'm an engineer, I'm not a linguist or phonetician, I can't read these. But the link into the talk today is anywhere you can see a pattern, and that pattern is very reproducible for speech. So as long as, you're a sort of average talker, and we'll talk about that a bit more, I can train a computer to figure out what was said by giving it pictures like this, which leads me into AI, artificial intelligence, okay? So what exactly is AI? There's a huge amount of hype about AI at the moment. It's everywhere. And it's kind of, for those of us who have been working in the area for quite a while, it's quite a change in how well some of this works. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I would have been a little bit less optimistic probably about the sort of applications underpinned by AI that we see now. So artificial intelligence refers to any sort of technology that is designed to accomplish the sort of tasks that usually have to be carried out by a human brain, okay? that they need a certain type of intelligence. So things like identifying patterns, recognizing images, understanding language, or solving problems like a chess game, okay? So, to tell you a little bit more about AI, I'm going to bravely try and play my first video. So let's just play this. It's a short explanation of AI from the Royal Society.
These are exciting times for artificial intelligence, or AI. But what is AI? AI is the science of making machines smart, using algorithms to allow computers to solve problems which used to be solved only by humans. AI already powers search engines, online shopping recommendations, and digital assistants. Radiologists can use AI to calculate the exact shape and volume of tumours, revolutionising treatment. Astronomers use AI to find and evaluate exoplanets in distant solar systems. And unhappy motorists are using it to discover if they can overturn parking fines. The possibilities of AI are endless, from fraud prevention to developing new strategies to address climate change. AI technologies today are brilliant at analysing vast amounts of data to learn to complete a particular task, a technique called machine learning. But AI is not good at transferring what it's learned from one type of task to another, learning abstract concepts and one-shot learning, where a general rule is learned from a single experience, the sort of broad intelligence humans excel at. But even without achieving this broad intelligence, AI is raising questions. How might AI affect work? People will still be needed in the workplace, but jobs and roles are likely to change as some tasks become automated and new jobs are created. There is a risk that, at least in the short term, this could increase inequality if some people are disproportionately affected and benefits aren't widely shared across society. And what about social equality and fairness? Bias coming from AI systems, even if unintentional, could disproportionately affect some social groups, influencing anything from job prospects to treatment by the justice system. Technology can play a role in helping to manage bias, but people need to address big questions about how society wants to use AI. Technology with AI at its heart has the power to change the world. The more of us that engage with shaping its development, the more chance we have to ensure a better, fairer future with AI.
So you see the mixture of the positives and the cautionary warnings there, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But back to my talk. My computer is a little slow. So AI is not something new. Don't think that AI is something that became a thing 3 years ago. Absolutely not. There have been people working in this area for decades, but a few particular things have happened that have accelerated the kind of technology that people have been trying to put together. So at the top there of a picture trying to represent data acquisition and storage, okay? So our ability to record things like, videos and images, text, to keep all that digitally has massively increased versus 10, 20 years ago. It's become, we can store more data and we can do it more cheaply, okay? Now, of course, there's lots of controversy over data centers and, all the impact of those, but we'll try and swerve away from going down that path. But so that's data and storage, and then another element of it is compute power. So if you don't work in computer science or engineering or a similar area, it's quite difficult to explain just how much more computer power there is now compared to 20 years ago. So you have more compute power on your phone than, a supercomputer did 20, 30 years ago. When I was doing my PhD 25 years ago, I might run an experiment with speech data that I might set running and would take a week to run. That same experiment, it's so trivial now, it would only take 15 minutes. So the sort of compute power we have, we just take it for granted. And you've probably heard of NVIDIA. they're the people who make the compute power that runs AI. There are other people, but they're the dominant player in the market. And that's why we all wish we bought NVIDIA shares 10 years ago. The other thing is the algorithms, the neural nets. So this is trying to represent a neural net. And without getting into the maths too much, it's the idea of representing learning more similarly to how the brain learns, okay? So you don't walk around with a child pointing out every last thing to them, okay? You get them started off and then they figure it all out for themselves, okay? That's how neural nets learn as well. And we try to eventually learn relationships between inputs and outputs, okay? And AI is what has led to the sort of speech technology that people like me are developing and working on today. So if you've ever used Siri on your iPhone, or if anybody has Amazon Alexa at home, you know, you talk to that. You use your voice as the input to that. You don't have to type anymore for so many applications. Speech is unique to each one of you. So it's used as a biometric in some banking services, less in Ireland, more in the UK. So you phone and you're authenticated by your voice. We'll talk about deep fakes later in the talk, because that's making that a less trusted technology. And, you know, we have to get a talking fridge in here somewhere, given the title of the talk. But, you know, if you merge speech technology with other things like, you know, smart cameras, Internet of Things, it's totally thinkable, you know, totally imaginable that you walk into the kitchen, you go, do I need to buy milk? And you're not talking to the wall anymore, you're actually talking to the fridge, and it will answer you back without you having to open the fridge. So, you know, wait for that technology. It's coming. They already have talking fridges. We just have to merge it with a little bit more useful interaction. So there are robots now that will talk to you. They're a little bit stilted. You know, I'm never quite sure whether I like the sorts of applications that they're particularly being aimed at. You know, the companion at home, that sort of thing. It makes me a little uncomfortable. But, you know, kids' toys with speech technology, the dog that your child or grandchild can say, sit, stand, walk, that recognizes their name. So it's a big fashion to have speech technology in toys now. AI is what was behind Charlie Bird's voice recently. If you know the story, so Charlie Bird, reporter on RTE who had MND, he got his voice back through a technology called voice banking. So we might talk a little bit about that later. So this is all speech technology enabled by artificial intelligence. And in that short video, you might have picked up on the phrase machine learning. So until about 4 years ago, we all talked about machine learning, but we sort of rebranded it as AI. Because machine learning is the maths behind the AI that you're seeing out in the world now. So the term is not new, again. It was coined in the 50s by this AI pioneer, I presume he was a computer scientist, but Arthur Samuel. So he described it as the field of study that gives computers the ability to learn without explicitly being programmed. So if you've ever coded, traditional coding is, if this, then do that. Otherwise, if this, do that. Otherwise, if this, do that. And you code every possibility. You give it instructions for everything that might ever happen. And then the last option is, otherwise, do nothing. You always have to give it a final choice in case it runs out of ifs. So, you know, that's classic programming. But if I wanted to design machine learning in the old style, now I'm a gardener, so I'm going to use this example for you. If I wanted to design a machine learning algorithm that would tell me the difference between different flowers. So the idea is I give it a picture of a flower and it tells me what that flower is, okay? So these exist now, okay? But if I tried to do this 15 years ago, I would have to come up with what are called features. I would have to think very hard as an engineer, what are the unique features of all these different flowers? So, you know, you might look at these, I'm trying to remember, I think that's an anemone on the left, and that's a helenium and a cosmos for the non-gardeners. But obviously colour is one feature. But I might go as an engineer, that's not really reliable. What if the photo was black and white? So I might try to isolate all the petals and count them. And then I might try and have measurements of, length to width ratio. Or I might look at the helenium in the middle there and go, okay, the middle of that's much bigger. So I might, try and measure that. So I'd handcraft lots of features that would help me tell the difference between these three flowers. The problem arises when you increase the number of flowers, okay? So, there's marigolds in the middle there. They're very closely linked with the features that I was trying to describe them with. So my system with my handcrafted features doesn't work very well anymore. So, they're all too easily confused. Modern machine learning, on the other hand, we use new approaches, new algorithms based on neural networks and a branch of machine learning called deep learning. So they're the big sort of phrases you'll hear. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. So deep learning is just really big neural networks, okay? So you show it pictures of the flowers and you let it figure out what the difference between them all is, So if you take a lifetime of gardening and think of looking at all these and finding out the name of them. So I just take a massive data set like this. I show the pictures to my neural network and I don't have to tell it how to tell the difference. It figures it out itself. I just label them and it will figure out what is the best way to decipher between all of these. Okay? So with that idea, I'll just, I'll say one more thing, that the one thing it's quite bad at, and this is what the video said about generalizing in, the way humans do. If you show a gardener a dahlia that they've never seen before, they'd probably be quite confident that it was a dahlia. They go, it looks really like a dahlia, it's probably a dahlia. But a neural net or an AI will just take a mad guess at it. Okay? And you might have heard about ChatGPT hallucinating. Okay? So it's a similar problem with them. So I just wanted to play another short video about AI. So a little video about machine learning.
Ability to learn and get better at tasks through experience is part of being human. When we're born, we know almost nothing and can do almost nothing for ourselves. But soon, we're learning and becoming more capable every day. But did you know that computers can do the same? Machine learning brings together statistics and computer science to enable computers to learn how to do a given task without being programmed to do so. Just as your brain uses experience to improve at a task, so can computers. Say you need a computer that can tell the difference between a picture of a dog and a picture of a cat. You could begin by feeding it images and telling it, this one's a dog, that one's a cat. A computer programmed to learn will seek statistical patterns within the data that will enable it to recognise a cat or a dog in the future. It might figure out on its own that cats have shorter noses and that dogs come in a larger variety of sizes, and then represent that information numerically, organising it in space. But, crucially, it's the computer, not the programmer, that identifies those patterns and establishes the algorithm by which future data will be sorted. One example of a simple yet highly effective algorithm is to find the optimal line separating cats from dogs. When the computer sees a new picture, it checks which side of the line it falls on and then says either cat or dog. But of course there can be mistakes. The more data the computer receives, the more finely tuned its algorithm becomes, and the more accurate it can be in its predictions. Machine learning is already widely applied. It's the technology behind facial recognition, text and speech recognition, spam filters on your inbox, online shopping or viewing recommendations, credit card fraud detection, and so much more. At the University of Oxford, machine learning researchers are combining statistics and computer science to build algorithms that can solve more complex problems more efficiently, using less computing power. From medical diagnoses to social media, the potential of machine learning to transform our world is truly mind-blowing.
Okay, so one of the applications that was mentioned there is speech recognition. And speech recognition is the technology that is giving us live captions here. Now, I haven't been turning around to see how accurate they are, but hopefully they're doing quite well. So speech recognition today works extremely well if you've ever used it. So you can get an application on your laptop. So instead of typing your emails, you just speak and the text will come up in front of you. It works very, very well, particularly if you take a little time to help it train to your voice, okay? So this is trained to my voice. So speech recognition generally works very well if you're a native English speaker, okay? Most of the research worldwide has been done on English and Chinese. It won't work so well if you're a minority language speaker or if you speak English maybe with a strong accent. That will affect the accuracy. So it works well with, normal voices. What's a normal voice? Well, unfortunately for children, their voice is not normal. So they have a tendency to say rather cute things like lello instead of yellow. That confuses an AI if it hasn't heard it before. It won't work very well in noisy conditions. And you have engineers like me trying to improve how speech recognition works. So whenever you're talking to somebody in a loud environment, if you find yourself doing that again, pay attention to how much you're watching the person's mouth, okay? Because visual information alongside the audio side of speech is really critical for humans. So I just want to check, has anybody ever heard of the McGurk effect? It's a great way of demonstrating this. So I'm going to play one more video and then we'll see. We're okay on time. We have another 10 or so minutes. This one should play here.
One moment, we are being bombarded by sensory information. Our brains do a remarkable job of making sense of it all. It seems easy enough to separate the sounds we hear from the sights we see. But there is one illusion that reveals this isn't always the case. Have a look at this. What do you hear? But look what happens when we change the picture. And yet, the sound hasn't changed. In every clip, you are only ever hearing ba with a B. It's an illusion known as the McGurk effect. Take another look. Concentrate first on the right of the screen. Now to the left of the screen. The illusion occurs because what you are seeing clashes with what you are hearing.
Now, if you didn't have a very good view of the screen, that might not have worked for you. But it's the idea that in your brain, what you see can overwrite what you hear. And, a lot of illusions, like visual illusions, once you know it's there, it won't trick you again. This will always trick you, okay? And it was a discovery by mistake, like most good research, back in the 70s, and it led people to start to understand a lot more about the audio plus visual perception of speech, that it's not just something we hear, that we need to see it as well as humans. So the next generation of speech recognition technology that we're working on is trying to lip read simultaneously to listening to audio, because it should work much better in noise. One thing I wanted to talk about, I talked about normal voices, okay? So if you grew up in Ireland, you know this man from Friday Night TV. But Gay Byrne was on TV for a long time, so we have a lot of audio from him. And it's very interesting to listen to his voice from when he was in his 20s.
Something had to give, and something just did. It was the Radio Ireland Night Orchestra, conducted by Colin Pearce and led by Jack Cheetle, putting the top to much Dunican, with a visit later on from Val of the St.
So this is him so he was in his 30s there, early 30s, 50s.
Joined now by an old friend of ours who really needs no introduction. Just last week he's been appointed head of folk music and folklore in RTE. Though mind you, we've all known that he was that for years.
And this is him at 75.
Good afternoon to you. Welcome once again. I've forgotten what the weather is like outside, but it was reasonably pleasant. I hope it is pleasant where you are. As usual, we start by acknowledging some nice messages and good, kind-hearted greetings.
So if you listen back to the first one, you'll find his voice, the pitch, his voice got much deeper as he got older. And that's typical in the male voice, okay? And it got richer. So from a musical point of view, you might talk about the timbre of it. A little bit more hoarse as he got older as well. And that's typical too. Because rather depressingly, like everything in the body, your voice ages, your face ages, your voice ages as well. And we can take people's speech and predict what age they are from their voice. You can actually predict a lot of things like health, height, all sorts of things from your voice. But here's one of the motivations for keeping your voice in good condition. Join a choir. It's great for exercising the muscles like the diaphragm, like tongue and, muscle control in your tongue and facial muscles will maintain your speech as well. And the problem is that an AI is usually trained on lots of data from people between 25 and 50. So it doesn't work very well for children. Now, there are additional reasons for kids in terms of grammar and sentence structure and their inability to maintain their attention on one thing. But when you're older, and this is just normal aging, this is just physical changes to your voices, it affects the performance of something like speech recognition for you. So, we're looking at ways to make it more robust to that, and not always just this idea of more data, more data, more data to train my AI. So I mentioned voice banking. Speech synthesis is, so we talked about speech recognition, that's going from a voice to words. But what if I want to change that around? I want to go from words to a voice, okay? And that's speech synthesis. So we talk about synthetic voices. And most people were very taken by surprise at how good the technology is, because we used to think of people like Stephen Hawking and his voice. Now, he got that voice in the 80s, but he started to identify with it. So even though the technology got much better, he went, no, that's me now. I'm going to keep it. So Charlie Bird, when did he die? It's not quite a year. But he had motor neuron disease, which affects your voice. And there's, a lot of conditions that affect people's voices. Now, he was lucky enough that there was a large amount of data on the RT archives that could be used to train a voice. Even 5 years ago, you would need at least 3 hours of data from a person. So if you're, lucky is not the right word, lucky or unlucky enough to know your voice is going to go before it goes, you would go to one of these voice banking companies and you would get your voice recorded, and they would train an AI on your voice. So you used to need about 3 hours of data. Now you can do it you can get a really good voice for you with about 30 minutes of speech. You can actually go onto websites which, if you just give them 5 minutes of your voice, will come up with a synthetic voice for you, because they can now use AIs trained on millions of voices and find a way of tweaking them to sound a bit more like you. So, the technology is improving all the time. But if you've heard Charlie Bird's voice, you will know that the intonation and the prosody, what we call prosody, the ups and downs, the way of expressing yourself is not so realistic unless you have a lot more data. So that's the positive side of how AI can be used. But obviously, you've probably heard of deep fakes. So it's kind of a segue into, is AI always used for good? So you might recognize this. This was doing the rounds about a year, 18 months ago, the Balenciaga Pope. So this is a deep fake. So years ago, you had to go into something like Photoshop and cut someone's head out and then paste it onto another picture. This is just a text prompt. Give me a photo of Pope Francis wearing a white Balenciaga coat, and you'll get this. And you might refine it and give them a necklace, you know. So it will come up with this. Now, you know, I'm sure Pope Francis has a sense of humour and laughed when he saw that. But the technology behind deepfakes is impressive and scary in equal terms. So, you know, it can be used in quite unethical ways. And just to give you an idea of how good the audio is now, so the speech part of deepfakes, this is a newsreader on CNN, okay? And let me see, is this? Yeah.
Second youngest son. He's suggesting it came out of nowhere. What we subsequently learned is it may have come from the former president or his legal team acting in bad faith. This is a deepfake example of what is possible with powerful computer and editing. It took around 72 hours to create this example from scratch using extremely powerful GPU. It could be improved with more computing time, but 90% of people cannot tell the difference.
So that's state-of-the-art technology for deepfakes. Now, there's a slight delay playing that via the PowerPoint there, but I work in speech. If I turn around and don't see that person talking, I can't tell the difference. If you pay attention to it, you'll see the slight misalignment of the voice. So, you know, again, it's the audio-visual deepfake that's a little easier to spot now, but audio fakes, where it's only the voice. So they've done studies. I even think 73% of the time is generous, okay? If we have time, do I have just 5 more minutes? We'll do a little test, okay? We're going to see how good you are at detecting audio deepfakes. Okay, so when I hit start, you'll hear a sample, and we are going to do a test. We'll do 10 of them scientifically, you know, significant. And I'm just going to randomly pick people, and you're going to tell me, is it a real voice or a fake voice, okay? So listen carefully. It could be you that has to answer.
Close fire.
Did we hear that?
When suddenly a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close fire.
Fake. We'll go with fake for that one. Correct. This audio is fake. So next. Oh, come on. Usually it just works for the next, but we'll try it.
And close fire.
No, that's the previous one. Yeah.
These changes aroused orthodox opposition and sometimes government intervention.
Wrong. It's a fake. Okay. Let's go next one. Sometimes this doesn't play out for some reason. Hang on.
It is a great shame. It is a great shame.
Somebody down the back there. Fake or real? Real? Authentic? Wrong. This audio is fake. Right, people, we're going to have to try harder.
Quite an income during the summer. There are a certain number of riverside roughs who make quite an income during the summer. There are a certain number of riverside roughs who make quite an income during the summer.
Somebody over here, shout up to me. Fake. I think it's fake. Correct, it's a fake. We could do that all day, but you can see that some of them it's really obvious. But if you remember the video I played there of the CNN anchor, it is very, very difficult to spot an audio deepfake. If you get the picture with it, it's a little easier still, but they're getting better and better. And, you know, we're all being warned about phishing emails and texts, you know, people pretending to be your child and things like that. But the worrying thing about this is when you think of how easily we let all our data be recorded, be posted online. There's plenty of examples of me speaking at events like this online, so it'd be easy enough to make a deep fake of my voice, ring my husband, you know, or just leave a voicemail. That's how they'll do it. They'll just leave a direct voicemail saying something. So you can see that phishing will become more and more, you know, creative. They've already gotten very creative in the texts that they will send you, trying to sound like a young person, for example. But, you know, let's keep an eye on that. Now, I'm out of time. Parting thoughts. Listen, you know, AI is here. It's here to stay, you know, and it's amazing, amazing technology in terms of what it can do. You know, the benefits that we haven't even talked to today, you know, in medical terms, in terms of assistive technology, in terms of the ability to analyze data, is tremendous. So, you know, it's mostly good, but it is potentially bad in the sense that, like any tool, comes, you know, a requirement to use it well. You know, I try and think of it, it's like a hammer, okay? So you need responsibility, you need regulation, and you need education. We can't ban hammers because we need them for lots of jobs, but they can smash windows, they can hurt people, they can do terrible things. You would not give a hammer to a child without giving them extreme direction on how to use it, how not to hurt themselves, and you would make a judgment based on your knowledge of that child of whether they're old enough to be exposed to it or be trusted with it, okay? So, you know, think a little bit more thinking about AI as if it were a hammer would benefit us in our daily lives, but, you know, there are lots of useful things to be done with hammers. So I'll end on that. Happy to take any questions. There's a few other links there if anybody's interested. I'm sure they can be shared somehow. But that's me. Thank you.
It frightened the life out of me there.
Apologies.
I was sitting thinking I actually love leaving my voice messages on WhatsApp instead of typing it all in. And then the next, and that sounded like a great idea because I have this bank of my voice in case something goes wrong. But now I'm realising, no, they have all your information and they have your voice and they can pretend to be you. And then the other thing was, I mean, the whole thing of when you're in a room with somebody and you're talking to somebody, how do you feel things like Zoom have affected people? I don't particularly like to be on Zoom because I feel I can't read the room when I'm on Zoom. I can't.
No, absolutely.
What do you think about those kind of technologies?
Yeah, so communication is different depending on whether you have in-person connections with people. Two-person conversations over Zoom are still pretty good because, you know, you're looking at the person, and even though they can't tell you're looking at them, it feels like you're looking at them, whereas in multi-party conversations, so when you're talking to somebody, you need to use all sorts of cues. So, you know, you're nodding your head at me, so I know that you're listening. Or we use things called back channels. We say, to encourage someone to keep going. And if you ask a psychologist what happens, things like eye gaze. So, you know this thing of when you're a child, look at someone when you're talking to them. We don't actually do that because it would freak people out. But there is a social dance that we do in terms of gaze and cognitive load and looking away and looking back at someone. There's a standard pattern of how that works. So we signal to people with hand gestures, with nods, with our agreement that we're about to switch and let you speak. That over Zoom, when there's more than two people, gets lost. And it's very, very hard for 6 people on a Zoom call to know, is it their turn to speak? Or, you know, when you're in a room with 5 or 6 people, you'll kind of go, and you'll use your body language to try and get into the conversation. You can't do that on Zoom. And that's why, you know, you have to get you either have to know the people very well, or you have to get quite good at formal things like using names or putting your hand up. You know, and companies like Amazon just yesterday said, right, you're all back in the office 5 days a week, people. Yeah, not 5 days, unless, I don't know, if there's a legal agreement in place or something. So, you know, we have done studies on why, we actually had a project called Room Reader, where we recorded people in Zoom conversations to try and learn what's different about conversations in any video conferencing, so Zoom, anything like that, and they are quite different. Humans like to be together.
I was looking at a thing a few months ago about AI models that are being used by designers online to sell their clothes rather than use real models. I was just wondering, how do they go about doing that? Because it's very hard to pick out who's an AI model and who is an actual model. Do you know, it's very hard.
Yeah, so you can create an avatar, so a sort of virtual character, which is has your likeness, but is actually a cartoon character. But they can be made much, much more photorealistic now. So there are multiple different ways you can do it. You can film someone with all sorts of sensors on their body to learn their emotions. So you'll put them in front of the green screens that they use in movies, and you'll learn their facial movements. So you'll get them to do all sorts of movements like this. You'll get them talking, and it's like the voice banking that you don't need quite as much data of just me anymore, because I've learnt what the average human looks like when they move and talk from hundreds and thousands and millions of other people. So I just have to adapt it a little bit to become more like you. And for modeling, it depends. I don't know if they're specific people, but
it's very hard to tell the difference between
yeah, computer vision is very realistic. Or if you look at any of the movies now, it's all the same. It's all the same technology. And yeah, that's one of the places where people are being pushed out of a job, potentially. Yeah, there's many different areas. It's not just solicitors and people like that.
Yeah, I do have a question. I do work with AI. I implement AI.
You do?
As well.
Excellent.
I do. My AI is called Simon. So I talk to an AI, basically. And the good thing about this technology, and I found myself, is then it's not judgmental, it's very knowledgeable, it's polite when it talks to me.
Yep.
And, it becomes like kind of a friend somehow, right? So, but what I can see as well with new generations and social media is that people get more isolated with the new technologies that are coming in. AI is so close to us that could happen as well. So people can lose themselves as asking very personal questions to a technology that is answering you in the best possible way it is, and not to come to one family member that can help you more. So I see a problem there in terms of society.
Yeah.
But I had to say that it's very, very good in terms of, having someone that is not judging you for the way, you are or not, and become very close to you. So how do you see that as an engineer, as a technologist, this concept?
Yeah, so, what's the division of responsibility? As an engineer, we do try not just to make things because we can. You do ask yourself, well, is this something useful? Could it be misused? And there's so few technologies that I can imagine that haven't already been developed by probably, people like the American Army already, that maybe me developing it and putting it out there and trying to educate people about what the limits are, and put results out, through publishing my work, putting results out that do things like prove that communication over Zoom is not as good an experience in education, for example. We've looked at things like that. I would have real difficulties with applications like, you can have your avatar psychologist, for example, who you talk to, and we as humans have a tendency, like you say, to put human properties that we, think it's human-like because it sounds human-like, and we think, a friend of the technology. And there is no replacement for a human in that, but, we start to rely on it because, it's cheaper. Our health system's falling apart. So let's use the avatar, let's use the AI to talk to this person to, plug a gap, because we as a society aren't willing to pay enough for the health service we need. So there are all sorts of big questions that, you know, require me as an engineer to say what's possible, what are the limits of the technology, and make sure that that's heard in the conversations around, okay, how are we going to use this technology? So I don't have all the answers, but I know they're important. You know.
Is there any control over the computers? You know, I know you put all the data into and all the rest of it from the very start. Everything goes into it. But I know it was a film, but you know, they take over the world sort of thing. Will that ever happen?
I don't think so. You know, it's not on the cards yet. You can always plug them out of the wall. There are AI experts, like you may have heard of a guy called Jeffrey Hinton, godfather of AI, they call him. He's far more pessimistic about the whole thing. I actually saw a talk with him. He was in UCD about 6 months ago. He's very pessimistic. Other people like me are kind of going, it's not that good. But maybe I just don't have access to the latest technology that other, you know, governments and stuff do. Maybe I just don't realize how powerful it is. But I'm not a doom and gloom person about AI. I think absolutely it can be misused. I think if we, you know, don't step up and put good regulations in place. You know, the EU is trying, but we're too slow. The government is too slow. This technology is moving so fast. We need to move a lot faster to get ahead of it. Yeah. And yeah, I think even, you know, you look at a simple thing like, should phones be allowed in primary schools? And look at how much hand-wringing there is over that. Meanwhile, the AI technology is accelerating ahead. So we do need regulations to speed up a lot. And
especially when you don't understand it, like yourself sort of thing.
Yeah. You know, and I work in this area, and, you know, you appear like an absolute draconian parent if, you know, you use the controls on the Apple iPhone and stuff, you know. Yeah, it won't win you any popularity contests. Yeah.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I think I'm on the pessimistic side, but one thing that freaks me out a little bit completely, I remember saying to my wife, or she saying to me, like, I need something. I remember saying, no, I think I'll get myself some salad. But 2 minutes later, ads come up on my phone pushing the product I've just mentioned. How does that work? Or, you know, or am I just being paranoid?
No, you're not. So it's part of the AI in my life workshop we do with transition year students, this whole idea of data and your data, and having a greater awareness when you download that free app onto your phone. And, you know, we always say to the kids, if the product is free, you're the product, okay? So things like in any app, you know, if you're the sort of person who goes, okay, 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 and doesn't read any of the stuff that you're given it access to, you know, you should always read the privacy policy in any app that you install on your phone. You know, are you giving it access to your microphone? You probably have loads of apps on your phone that have access to your microphone, but you don't even know it.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I just mentioned it in conversation.
Yeah.
My phone may not have been on me, it's been the table, so I just feel, you know, maybe I'm being paranoid. I just feel I'm being listened to, you know?
No, you're not being paranoid, but you should. I don't know if the government has kind of sites where you can educate yourself about stuff like this, but maybe Adapt do a little work in this area, so maybe I could find out from them. But you can retrospectively go back into an app. You can delete all your data. You can turn off sharing of applications like your microphone. You can turn it off anytime you want, but they're relying on you not knowing how to do that. Yeah, so, you know, when you should always read the privacy statement. If you're downloading it from the App Store in Apple, if you click on the privacy statement and it brings you to an empty web page, you should not put that app on your phone. Because if they don't have a privacy statement, they don't care about your privacy, you know. You know, it's much better to pay €5 for something that isn't using your data in the same way. But it is very hard. We all have a digital footprint now. It's just a question of how big it is, and an awareness of what is privacy in the modern world. Like I know that my speech is out on YouTube. I just have to, from a career point of view, make my peace with that. Is it ever going to be misused? I don't know. But yeah, you should inform yourself, and it is possible to get better informed. Yeah.
Is it the Wild West out there in terms of controlling who's going to use this technology? In the same way that you're only really getting to grips now with the likes of Meta, Facebook, and the various apps, TikTok and so on.
Is it the Wild West in what sense? Like,
anybody can get their hands on the technology if they have the resources to purchase it. And we've only seen in the last few days, the criminals using the encrypted, old encrypted technology, and the police and Interpol and so on only managing to break into it and detect.
Yeah, so that's technology, even in a more general sense. It's not just AI-based technology, So, yeah, it's a question of resourcing. Sorry. Is it the Wild West? I tend to say not entirely. But, yeah, there's a lot of access to a lot of technology which people don't understand and can be misused, absolutely. Yeah, and maybe all you can do is educate yourself a little more so that you need to be a little less trusting of things you hear, things you see. It's like the fake news that you read. You're going to hear it and see it now as well.
No, I was just asking because you mentioned earlier about psychology, and I'm a psychologist.
Okay.
And we work a lot online and in person. But my concern would be, and I suppose you won't have the answer in relation to the data, that when people start to work or interact with AI, where does that data go? What happens with them? Can it be turned around and used against the person if they start to open up or they start to become vulnerable in a space? That's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you're using a recording of a Zoom call, if you record it,
I've never recorded.
Yeah, you need to be very clear with patients about what happens to their data. So GDPR controls a lot of that in that sense. But, if I use technology like Siri or Amazon, when I started using that and clicked OK, those recordings, you're agreeing to let them use your voice to train other applications. So they have those recordings. Yes, they're not meant to misuse them, but we've all seen the high-profile cases where those recordings have been misused. Yes, that's the exception, but that it happens at all is quite worrying. So areas like health would have to have an awful lot more regulation and clarity around them for things to happen online. Because, the right to disappear for that information or that conversation to disappear after it's been had is really important for patients. Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I've got to go. That exact job. And I'm sure Naomi does too. Thank you very much again.
Not at all.
Naomi,
Thank you.
Thank you.